Have you ever known a man perpetually on the verge of greatness, yet forever stalled at the starting line? He speaks with the visionary's fire, moves with the grace of a rising star, dreams with a prophet's certainty. He carries the unspoken promise of extraordinary things, a promise left perpetually unfulfilled. He charms, captivates with his words, his flights of fancy, but lives as if time itself were a phantom slipping through his fingers. He's the embodiment of the eternal boy, existing in a hazy realm between potential and reality, trapped in a perpetual spring that never bears fruit. He might be 28 or 50, but his soul remains stubbornly 18. He's a collector of beginnings, a terrified avoider of endings. Relationships ignite with youthful fervor, only to fizzle as intimacy demands commitment. He changes cities, careers, passions as easily as he changes shirts. A stylish fugitive, eloquent and graceful, yet running from anything that requires roots, depth, responsibility. His world is one of infinite possibilities, as long as he doesn't actually start anything. Tomorrow is his constant companion, someday his favorite verb, a someday that never arrives, a someday he secretly fears will. He's not malicious, often kind, engaging, sensitive, but he's a master of self-sabotage, his own and others, because where there's a lure without structure, frustration takes root. He often sees himself as too exceptional for the mundane, yet incapable of sustaining any genuine journey. He talks of creative projects left unfinished, books yet to be written, decade-old travel plans, all recounted with the same vibrant enthusiasm as the very first time. But the months melt into years, and he remains stuck in a kind of existential puberty. Deep down, there's a sacredness to him, an untouched sensitivity, a genuine creative spark, a refusal to bow to the pragmatic, mechanized reality many call adulting. That, in itself, isn't a flaw. The problem arises when this refusal morphs into paralysis, when the fear of routine becomes justification for never confronting his shadows, when clinging to an illusion of freedom becomes a gilded cage. Jung warned us, what we avoid confronting becomes our fate. The eternal boy flees structure, discipline, commitment, condemning himself to emptiness, boredom disguised as freedom, the repetitive cycle of starting and abandoning. This cycle isn't silent, it wounds. It wounds the partners who love and wait. It wounds the friends who believe in each new grand vision. It wounds the mother still footing the bill while he finds himself. Most of all, it wounds his own soul, wasted in endless preparation for what could have been. He inhabits the realm of ideas, refusing to set foot on the ground of reality, disconnecting from time. His internal clock seems broken. He believes it's still early when, in truth, it's almost too late. The symbolic mother, that profound archetypal figure, plays a crucial role. Often, this man remains under the unconscious influence of the Great Mother, the source of security, nurture, and control. Sometimes the real mother is overprotective, sometimes absent, but the archetype persists. He seeks this same comforting embrace in the world, a partner who treats him like a boy, a friend who tolerates his disappearances, a boss who understands his delays. This comfort, however, is a trap. The eternal boy refuses to sever the symbolic, umbilical cord, leading to a chronic emotional infantilization, creative, charming, profoundly limiting. The shadow of the eternal boy, the denied facet of his psyche, is composed of resentment, envy, self-delusion. He views those with stable lives with disdain, secretly envying their stability. He laughs at their routines, silently weeping, for lacking a home of his own. Because despite his denials, humans crave belonging, yearn to build something lasting. The eternal boy, however unwittingly, desires growth. But growth demands suffering, and he hasn't yet accepted that. There's undeniable beauty in the youthful spirit, raw creativity, artistic impulse, faith in something greater. But without the tempering hand of responsibility, it becomes an empty spectacle. Undirected freedom is a balloon adrift. It ascends, dances on the wind, and disappears. The eternal boy believes he can be anything, therefore becoming nothing. To become something real, one must relinquish, choose, sacrifice possibilities to deepen a single one. And that's his greatest struggle. He may have a precarious job or scrape by with gigs that maintain the illusion of autonomy. He may live with his parents or be emotionally dependent on his partner. He might even have children, yet act as an older brother, not a father. This reveals not malice, but a profound existential impasse. He doesn't know how to move forward more than that. He fears getting lost in the process. But the truth is he's already lost in the labyrinth of his own idealizations. Until he accepts traversing the desert of reality, he'll continue wandering among illusions. At first glance, the man trapped in the eternal boy archetype seems light, even fun. He's the life of the party, knowledgeable about obscure bands, independent films, mind-bending metaphysical ideas that captivate upon first meeting. But beneath the lightness lies immense weight, the weight of never truly choosing. He carries an unrecognized grief, the grief for all the lives unlived, all the paths not followed to their end. He's always at an internal crossroads, and every crossroads unresolved becomes suffering. When you spend time with this man, a cruel pattern emerges. He's never fully present, neither to himself nor others. His soul seems perpetually projected outward, to an idealized future, a platonic love, a when I'm ready. But this when is a chimera, a symbolic delay of maturation. He doesn't want to age internally, because aging is accepting the flow, the passage of time, the closing of certain doors. The eternal boy refuses this. He wants to keep all doors open, but none lead anywhere because he's anchored to no direction. In romantic relationships, he's a walking contradiction, intense and absent. Initially, he charms with an immediate, profound connection, speaking to the soul, making grand promises, seeing his partner as muse, refuge, inspiration. But at the slightest sign of demand or responsibility, he retreats, changes his tune, emotionally disappears. He feels suffocated by anything demanding inner growth. Essentially, he's saying, "Love me, but don't expect anything from me." This corrodes any true bond, because mature love demands reciprocity, building real presence, not just poetry. In friendships, he's equally cyclical, vanishing for months, returning with intensity, sharing grandiose visions, but intolerant of simple frustrations. A friend confronting him with reality is seen as an enemy. Gentle criticism becomes an unbearable accusation in his mind. The eternal boy's ego is fragile, though he strives to appear strong. He lives on the edge of a fence, because any confrontation with his immaturity feels like humiliation. He wants admiration, not challenge, therefore often surrounds himself with those reinforcing his illusions. In his career, or whatever resembles one, he avoids the word routine like a curse. He might dabble in creative projects, freelance work, jobs giving an appearance of freedom, but everything must maintain an aesthetic of unbound. Fixed commitments, schedules, contracts, all deeply terrify him. Even when brilliant at what he does, he finds a way to quit before establishing himself, always with a noble justification. The environment wasn't healthy. I want something more aligned with my essence. I'm in a transition phase. But the truth he avoids is that his transition is perpetual, and nobody lives eternally in transit without gradually losing themselves. Jung stated that individuation demands confronting one's shadow, and the shadow of the eternal boy is replete with avoided pain, fear of rejection, fear of mediocrity, fear of being forgotten. Behind the rhetoric of not fitting the system often lies a secret feeling of not being good enough. He takes refuge in the fantasy of being destined for greatness because he can't cope with the inevitable mediocrity every human must integrate. We aren't all exceptional all the time, and the eternal boy can't bear this simple truth. The most tragic aspect is that this man often possesses extraordinary potential. He's creative, empathetic, original. But by rejecting the natural cycles of growth, he never truly blossoms, remaining an eternal bud. His genius is a seed that never becomes a tree. He's fertile ground without the daily work of tending. This, in time, rots from within. Self-sabotage becomes the rule. He gets involved with unsuitable people, misses deadlines, wastes opportunities, all without understanding why. But underneath it all, the same pattern persists, a visceral fear of growing up, because growth requires something to die. This something is the enchanted boy who still wants rescuing. The eternal boy's psyche seeks a rescuing figure, the ideal partner, the perfect mentor, the project that will finally work out. But no one can perform this rescue, because the true journey is internal. No one matures through delegation. The more he projects his salvation outward, the further he distances himself from his own soul. By now, you've probably thought of someone, a sibling, an ex-partner, a friend, or perhaps yourself. There's no shame in this. We all carry a fragment of the eternal boy within. The problem arises when this fragment dominates, preventing genuine growth. So I propose something different. If this resonates, and if you feel something has been named for the first time, if pieces have clicked into place, then I invite you subscribe to the channel. Not out of obligation or habit, but because you want to be part of an authentic, profound journey of symbolic maturation. Here we speak of souls, shadows, rituals not found in books. You're welcome here with your wounds and your light, because there's no awakening without traversing the night. And more, tell us in the comments. What part of this resonated most? A phrase, an example, a memory triggered? I don't just want to know what you thought, but what you felt. Let's transform this into a living circle, each contributing a piece of their truth. Perhaps your story will resonate with someone silently suffering, and reading you, they'll understand they're not alone. There comes a point when the magic of the eternal boy begins to unravel, not because the world grows crueler, but because the enchantment no longer holds up to the mirror. He looks at his reflection and sees something strange. The eyes still shine, but the soul now weighs heavily. Friends drift away. Projects remain unfinished. The promise of someday starts sounding like a joke. What was once charm becomes annoyance. Lightness, escapism. Time, that relentless elder, begins to collect its due, and the eternal boy has no accumulated emotional reserves, only broken promises. At this point, many enter a profound crisis, because the fantasy of freedom reveals itself as a symbolic prison. He realizes his life lacks foundation, that his choices were in fact the absence of choices, his identity built on negations. I'm not like others. I don't follow the system. I don't attach myself to anything. But emptiness exacts its price. That freedom, lacking structure, transforms into an inner desert, an echo of himself. The shadow emerges forcefully, whispering of all the times he said not now and never returned, of promises made under the moonlight, evaporating at dawn, of people who loved that charming boy and drifted away, feeling something within them die from lack of reciprocity. The shadow doesn't scream, it cruelly whispers, "You wasted it." This phrase can break a soul in two, but there's a path, not of guilt or punishment, but of courage. Courage to die symbolically. The eternal boy doesn't need destroying. He needs integrating. The inner child isn't the enemy, the problem is when it rules. The crossing demands a rite of passage, a moment of looking inward and saying, enough. Enough waiting to be rescued. Enough chasing butterflies while the house burns. Enough using genius as an excuse to flee life. This rite needn't be grandiose. It sometimes begins with a simple act, a sincere apology, completing something left unfinished, staying in a difficult conversation without fleeing, admitting what you don't know, starting over from the basics. These small deaths are sacred. Each dethrones a fragment of the boy and makes space for the man. And the man, the true man, isn't the opposite of the eternal boy, but his matured continuation. He also dreams, but he achieves. He also feels, but he endures. He also loves, but he builds. He knows true freedom demands structure, that time is finite, that vulnerability isn't weakness, and that commitment is, in fact, the deepest path to inner freedom. This is where the archetype of the inner father emerges, not as an authoritarian figure, but as a symbolic guide. The inner father is the one who says, "It's time to plant," even without guarantees of harvest. He teaches to endure creative boredom, silent frustration, the weight of real choices. In doing so, he liberates the eternal boy. The boy didn't want to flee, he just lacked an internal adult to embrace him. The father is that adult. When he emerges, the boy can finally rest. Maturation isn't a loss, but a transfiguration. The pain felt in this process isn't punishment, it's symbolic purification, the price for living a life with soul. When the man crosses this dark night, he finds something he didn't know existed on the other side, true belonging, with others, with time, with himself. He sees himself as part of the world, not an exception, and this, paradoxically, is liberating. Perhaps you're at this point, or know someone who is. What's needed isn't judgment, but presence. If you recognize this archetype within you, congratulations. This is the key to transforming it. The unconscious governs us, the conscious we can integrate. There's a quiet beauty in the moment the eternal boy lowers his guard, drops the mask of forced lightness, staged spontaneity, charm that's become a crutch. In this subtle, sacred instant, something breaks within. Not destruction, but release. The illusion shatters, the essence is freed. In this breach, true birth happens, the symbolic birth of the man who embraces the boy without being his prisoner. This process is never linear. It happens in spirals, lapses, falls, and restarts. Sometimes it manifests in silence before a difficult choice, sometimes in a conversation where for the first time one says, "I don't know how to be better, but I'm trying." Other times it's in self-care, not to display well-being, but to sustain a soul under reconstruction. When this inner reunion happens, the man discovers he can create without fleeing, be intense without sabotaging, love without dissolving. He learns to differentiate illusory freedom from true freedom, that born from commitment to time, affections, and his own limits. He understands that "not now" can be poison when overused, and that delaying life is a disguised form of giving up. But simultaneously, he discovers the eternal boy possesses gifts not to be extinguished but channeled, intense creativity, unique sensitivity, connection with the symbolic, the ability to see the world with enchanted eyes. All can flourish on firm ground. What was once an inner burning fire becomes a warming, illuminating flame. The man who traverses this cycle values the emotional adolescence not as a mistake, but as a territory that needed inhabiting before being transcended. He realizes that carrying wounds doesn't make him less, it makes him human. He's no longer what he was, but he doesn't deny his history. He looks back with compassion at the symbolic mother who loved too much and suffocated, at the loves he tried to save and let slip away, at the grand projects that never left the drawing board. All become raw materials for reconstruction. This man might be an artist learning to complete his works, a teacher finding meaning in planting seeds in young minds, a counselor listening to the unheard, or someone who never imagined themselves important, but who, learning to sustain their presence, becomes a beacon for others. The profession matters less. What matters is that he now inhabits his life consciously. Perhaps throughout this, you felt something shift within you, a name for unnamed pain, a recognition that this journey is also yours. If so, I invite you, share it with us. In the comments, open a piece of your path. Tell your story, your phase, your turning point, or your confusion. This space is more than a channel. It's a symbolic circle of people trying to escape emotional inertia to find meaning, foundation, truth. And if you felt this touched you, if it named what you already felt but couldn't express, then subscribe. Not out of obligation, but like lighting a candle and saying, "I want to be here when the next conversation happens." Like recognizing that certain content isn't for the algorithm, it's for the soul. And souls, when they meet, birth beautiful things. Now it's your turn. Respond with what resonated, what hurt, what gave you hope. And if you can, say what you learned. Not to validate the work, but to nourish this symbolic community we're creating, brick by brick, truth by truth. The journey of the eternal boy doesn't end. It transforms. And in recognizing this, perhaps we can finally live not as fugitives from pain, but as builders of meaning. Childhood doesn't die. It settles within the adult who had the courage to grow.